Hey, it's Drybear. Another month has gone by, which means it's time for another class popularity video for Lost Ark, this time in July. Now, I've been doing these popularity videos ever since the launch in February, and it has actually been very interesting to track the changes in the class popularity for the Western players, both Western Europe and the North American, South American players. And this month might actually be the biggest change and shuffling we've seen in the last 5 months. So let's go. But first, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Who knows? I might even be streaming right now. Now, if you're curious on last month's or any of the previous months, I'll have last month's linked on screen and down below in the description. And there's gonna be some pretty standard things here. So we can start out with the beginning. First place is Sorceress. Second place is Deathblade, and third place is Berserker. The numbers I have on screen is their overall play rate and interaction with auction house, playing, appearing, that sort of thing. There's basically a holy trinity at the top and a holy trinity at the bottom that isn't really seem to be changing very much. In fact, in other regions, the Deadeye, Soulfist, Sharpshooter triplet appears at the bottom of almost all regions. However, we have seen the Sorceress, Deathblade, and Berserker in that exact order almost every single month since the launch. It seems that Sorceress, Deathblade, and Berserker are just going to be our most popular classes in the West, and that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. You can even see that Sorceress is a standard deviation or two away from the pack. In fact, it's kind of shocking how much of the player base is playing Sorceress, and you can probably see this anecdotally in your groups. Even making groups, it's pretty common to run into 4 or 8 mans that have 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 Sorceresses in them. It's just a very popular class. It has been the queen of Western release ever since launch, and that's just kind of the way that it is. Deathblade, Berserker kind of makes sense, that big bursty damage, but in between is where this month gets interesting. So on the screen, I have the relative position change. Again, this is how many places this class has changed since last month. And you can see by the percentages, some of them are very close. So, when you see things like Paladin down 6, that's just 6 places, but a lot of the cutoffs here are pretty close. So it's not like as big, just the middle class is fighting for relative positioning. And let's start with the beginning of that middle group, Shadowhunter. I don't know what's going on with Shadowhunter, I'll be honest with you. For the first 2 or 3 months of launch, we saw Shadowhunter fighting with Deathblade for the most the top 3. In fact, in many cases, like in Europe Central or Europe West, we saw Deathblade and Shadowhunter almost equal, and in some cases, Shadowhunter beating Berserker. But around the time we were getting Vaultin, Shadowhunter started to decline. We actually saw Shadowhunter fall to the middle of the group, kind of getting left behind. People had Shadowhunter characters, but they were abandoning them, playing other classes, leaving their Shadowhunter in the dust. And for whatever reason, with Vicus, we're seeing an upturn in Shadowhunter play. It could just be that Shadowhunters, especially demonic impulse Shadowhunters, are cheap alts because they only need 2 really good gems, and the rest of their gems they can have empty if they're just doing demon form damage. So maybe people are starting to pick up Shadowhunters as their alt and play them every single day and show more activity on them. And same thing with Gunslinger. So Shadowhunter and Gunslinger went down with Vaultin's release, and with Vicus coming out have shot back up. And I'm wondering if maybe, Gunslinger can be pretty challenging to play. They can also die very easily. They're very squishy. They have locked animations. So maybe people, and when they were first being introduced into Legion raids with Vaultin, they felt like they didn't want to play that class. They were abandoning it. And as they got more comfortable with the difficulty level of Legion raids, Vaultin, Vaultin Hard, and now with Vicus, they're feeling more confident with how Legion raids play out in Lost Ark, and they want to retry their Gunslinger and give it another shot. But let me know what you think down in the comments, why you think Gunslinger dropped in popularity along with Shadowhunter for leading up to and during the Vaultin release. And then for Vicus, we're just seeing a big upturn in them being played again. Let me know what you think down below. Gunlancer is coming up 2 spots here as well. Gunlancer has historically been hovering around the midpoint. In some cases, we saw Gunlancer come up a little bit past the midpoint and then come down a little bit. We saw Gunlancer a lot more popular in Europe than in North America, but some regions saw Gunlancer climb up. But again, for this month with Vicus, Gunlancer coming up a bit. Maybe people, again, are getting more comfortable with mechanics, or maybe people, it's the opposite. Maybe people are tired of dying to Legion raid mechanics, and they like the fact that Gunlancer has not only a parry that they can use, a counter, but also they can shield themselves. They have very defensive ultimate, and they have a 5-second dash, so you don't really have to do mechanics as as precisely with Gunlancer, because there's a lot of give with how tanky they are. I'm not sure. Let me know down below. Now, next after Gunlancer is Wardancer, and this one is probably the biggest upset we've seen in a while. Ever since the launch, Wardancer has kind of been towards the bottom, and we kind of expected this to happen. We knew from other regions that Wardancer was a class that was pure scaling, which means that in tier 1, in tier 2, and early tier 3, Wardancer doesn't feel that great. She is a class that needs a lot of scaling, good gems, good cards, a set bonus from your armor, a good weapon, good runes. You need a wealth rune, a legendary wealth rune. There's a lot going on that the Wardancer needs to fit right. And it takes a while to get there. In fact, you really don't see Wardancer come online the way that she does until about 1460, when you start getting your 4 or 6 piece set bonus, where you can get crazy attack speed, move speed, cooldown reduction. You can see her kind of kick up, and a lot of scaling makes her damage go really high. So what we saw in the first few months was Wardancer being towards the bottom. I think in 1 month, maybe in March, Wardancer I think was around 2nd or 3rd to last. Not very popular at all, not heavily utilized. There were a few servers in EU East that really liked her, but overall not very popular. But after Vaulton and now with Vicus, Wardancer has come up into the top 7. She has shot up 4 places since last month and is turning out to be one of the more popular classes in Western regions. Let me know what you think about this down below. I guess it just clicked for people. They kind of kept their Wardancer leveled up along the way, but then once they started getting those relic accessories, the relic armor set bonuses, Wardancer's finally coming into her own, and people really want to play her more, so she's shooting up a good bit. After Wardancer is the Glavier, and I'm kind of shocked. We saw Glavier come out actually on the release month of Glavier. I believe she was in the top 3, if not top 4. One of the most, if not the most anticipated class releases in the West. There's a reason why Smilegate and AGS moved Glavier's release up so abruptly, is because they knew that she was going to be a very popular class, very heavily desired. And so she came out and she was gangbusters. I mean, everyone has a Glavier probably sitting on their roster. A lot of people switched to Glavier main almost instantaneously, but slowly, ever so slowly since the release, we've seen Glavier drop down maybe 1 or 2 places every month. And with this month, with Vicus having Vaulton out for a month, we see Glavier drop down again. And this, there's probably a lot of reasons for this. Very curious to see what you guys think in the comments and on Reddit. But maybe it's just they tried, the idea of Glavier works. They love the skill set. They love the look and feel of it, but it just doesn't play the way they thought it would, or maybe over time it just doesn't keep them coming back. I'm not sure why Glavier is dropping down, or maybe, I've heard people say that with the Pinnacle build, they don't like the standstill that Red Dragonhorn has, or the wind up with Thrust of Destruction, or they don't like having to stance swap back and forth for some mechanics. And even then, some of those people have tried Control and just didn't like it. So yeah, let me know what you think about Glavier. Coming up after that is the Artillerist, and this one was one of the least popular classes in the game, and kind of like Wardancer has been climbing every month ever since. Now, they did get some changes 2 months ago that made them a lot easier to play. It made their barrage build a lot more reliable. It means they can dodge out of their barrage mode They made the focus fire and the barrage mode more reliable. They got their stagger moved around so they don't have to worry about retaliation mechanics as much. Like, they just got a lot of nice quality of life changes that made them a little less grating and challenging to play. And ever since in the West, they've just been climbing. I don't even think we see blasters in Korea or artillerists in other areas climb like this. It's kind of shocking, but there's just a lot of people that really like artillerist and has been slowly climbing ever since. Up next, we have the paladin and the bard, and there's a lot to talk about with this. When the game came out in, say, like February, March, and April, paladin was in the top 5. Paladin is a very common aesthetic in Western games. A lot of people love playing paladins, and paladin was very popular. Over time, we saw paladin kind of drop down. Bard was about where she's about where she was on launch. Bard was not super popular, but more popular than, you know, the bottom 4 or bottom 5. So it's right where she is now, is about where she was on Western launch. And then when Vulcan came out, we saw this huge surge of people making and boosting their paladins and their bards. Mostly because we had a support shortage. Going into Vulcan, there were, you know, you could see pages of groups that were, you know, 6 out of 8 or 3 out of 4 just waiting for a support. And it was difficult to get support classes into your groups, to get the groups run. We still have that problem now, but it seems that the people that quickly rushed over to boost up their paladin or their bard to fill that need, you know, 30 days later, a month later, are starting to move away from those classes again. So I'm feeling like we're getting the popularity that we're going to get for support then in the long term, and the people that kind of, you know, looking for that, you know, flavor of the month. Hey, we really need supports really bad, and if I play a support, I can get into a group easy. I guess they just couldn't hack it. They didn't stick with it, and the popularity has dropped quite a bit for paladin and for bard. And obviously right away you can see there's an issue here. If we say that every competitive PvE group, you know, every group of 4 needs 1 paladin or bard, and then every group of 8 needs 2, that means that 25% of the players in groups need to be support. And if you add paladin and bard together, that gives you 10.5%, which is less than half of what you need. So that kind of proves that we do have this support shortage. There's definitely not enough paladins or bards going around. So if you have someone in your static that plays one, thank them and try to encourage them to keep going, because it makes everything so much easier. And even with Vicus, we can see how important it is to have a support in your group. It's just so good, and I can't wait for us to get artists into the mix that might have people switch over to playing a support main. But yeah, I mean, I guess all the people that made and pushed their supports last month for Vulcan did not keep that steam going for Vicus, as shown by their drop in popularity. Scrapper is where she was last month. After the buff, she got a pretty big buff you know, a couple patches ago. And not only did she get damage buff, but she got some of her requirements for having to use your self buffs before using your abilities. That got removed, and then some of her abilities got buffed, and she actually got buffed overall. So we saw her jump up a couple places when this happened, and then those people just stuck with it, I guess. There's Scrapper mains out there that are diehard. Scrapper's my highest class in West as well. So there it is. I mean, Scrapper just hasn't changed ever since that buff, and people are still enjoying it. Right underneath it is the Striker, just where it was before. And this one is kind of like the reverse of War Dancer. We saw Striker being extremely popular, especially in NA West, and a little bit in NA East as well. Europe had Striker kind of in the middle, and South America, same thing. But Striker started out higher on everyone's lists, and over time, like it's the inverse of War Dancer, has been slowly and steadily dropping in popularity. And we saw last month was probably the biggest drop in popularity. Striker dropped down into the bottom 5 and has just been sitting there. So I'm not sure what it is about Striker. Maybe it's the back attack requirement, and not every Striker build uses swiftness like War Dancer. So it's a little bit, more dependent on positioning. Maybe they don't like having the back attack requirement, or maybe, you know, they don't find Death Blow or Esoteric Flurry to their liking, but they've kind of been shelving their strikers for the time being, and he's just kind of been sitting down there with the bottom 4. Next, we jump into the holy, or I guess you could say unholy trinity. These 3 classes have been kind of clumped together at the bottom in almost every region, including you know, Japan, Korea, and everywhere else. Sharpshooter, Soulfist, and Deadeye have been sitting at the bottom almost always. We actually did see Sharpshooter start out high. Soulfist, especially in North America, started really high. Maybe there were just people that really liked the Dragon Ball Z aesthetic or the idea of Soulfist, but over time they have plummeted to the bottom. So you're not going to see too many Sharpshooters, Soulfists, or Deadeyes in general. And you know, some of that I've had this conversation many times with people. Sharpshooter just, I guess, isn't thematic enough, or isn't exciting enough, or isn't as interesting enough as other classes. The people that play Sharpshooter, in my experience, are reliable and skilled, and then there's just not that many of them to go around. Soulfist is hard to play with one of the, you know, with the hardest ultimate in the game to land with the Spirit Bomb, and requires a lot of practice and has some kind of weird jankiness with it. It did get some reworking in the balance patch that, just like Scrapper, the dependencies on self-buffing were removed to make it a little bit easier to play, but still just kind of has been struggling. And what's really interesting is last month we saw Destroyer kind of push down the Unholy Trinity down at their bottom, and ever since then Destroyer has just been dropping. Now granted, Destroyer was one of the only classes that launched without a pass. It launched at a weird time without much support, so you kind of expect it. But even then, ever since, has just been dropping down and down. Destroyer isn't a particularly popular class in other regions, so seeing it fall like this is kind of expected. It's slower play style, a lot more dependency on windup. I think it's super satisfying. I love my Destroyer. I love playing him, but it has always been a very unpopular class, and maybe a Smilegate and AGS know it too, and that's why they were kind of, the first time we're gonna skimp on a power pass is gonna be on Destroyer, so maybe they just kind of knew that was coming. But let me know what you think. This is the popularity for July. A lot of damage classes coming up. The supports going down is kind of painful to see, but maybe we kind of just make it work, and that's just how it works, and that's just how it is. But let me know what you think about these positionings for July, what you expect to happen to the next month with August and going forward. And yeah, let's chat about it. Let's discuss. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.